Nancy Guthrie did not disappear because a stranger found her. She disappeared because someone who already knew her decided she needed to. Everything else in this case, the mask, the camera, the 41 minutes, the staged scene, the DNA at Quantico, exists inside that one reality. And a forensic psychologist who has spent decades studying exactly this type of crime applied the documented science to what happened in Tucson and produced the most specific and disturbing conclusion this investigation has seen. Today, we are going to walk through every piece of it. For months, the public has been asking who was on that porch, who wore that mask, who carried that backpack, who disabled that camera and walked into the darkness with an 84-year-old woman and never came back. Those are real questions, they matter, but they are questions about the hand holding the weapon. Nobody has been asking about the mind that decided to pick it up. And that distinction, between the person who executed this crime and the person who designed it, is the difference between looking at a shadow and looking at the thing casting it. Today, we are not talking about the shadow. Today, we are going behind it. Subscribe right now and turn on every notification, because this video builds the most complete picture of who is responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance that the public record has produced. Not based on guesswork, not based on forum theories or social media speculation. Based on documented forensic science, decades of FBI research data, and the publicly stated analysis of one of the most credentialed criminal psychologists working in America today. Stay with us from the first word to the last, because the picture only becomes complete when all of it is in front of you at the same time. Before we go anywhere near the forensic analysis, we need to spend a moment with the woman this is actually about. Because it is very easy, dangerously easy, to let a case like this become about the investigation, about the evidence, about the science, and forget who is at the center of it. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is 5 feet tall. She raised 3 children largely on her own after losing her husband. She tended a garden she had been nurturing for decades. She attended the same church every Sunday morning for 30 years and never missed a single service. She had been in the same home in the Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona for over half a century. She had a pacemaker implanted to regulate her heart. She needed daily medication. The sheriff of Pima County confirmed publicly that she could not walk 50 yards under normal conditions without difficulty. Half a football field. That was the physical reality of the woman who was taken from her home in the middle of the night. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she had dinner with her daughter Annie and came home. The garage door closed behind her at 9:50. The neighborhood was quiet. The night appeared completely ordinary. And then at 1:47 in the morning, a masked figure appeared on the doorbell camera at her front door. Armed, gloved, moving through that porch with a calm that had no business being there. The figure covered the camera lens, and the footage went dark. At that exact same moment, Nancy's pacemaker registered a sharp, sudden cardiac spike. Her heart confirmed what no camera could capture after that point. She was awake, she was conscious, and she knew. At 2:28 in the morning, the pacemaker lost its connection to the monitoring unit in her bedroom. The signal dropped. 41 minutes after the camera went dark, the last electronic trace of Nancy Guthrie went silent. 8 minutes after that, a ring camera 2.5 miles away caught a vehicle heading south toward the Mexican border 60 miles away. More than 100 days have passed since that night. Nancy Guthrie has not been found, no confirmed arrest, no identified suspect, no public resolution. And the reason that matters for what we are about to cover is this. Every day without an answer is a day the forensic picture becomes more important, not less. Because when the visible trail goes cold, the documented science of human criminal behavior becomes the most reliable map this investigation has. And that map points somewhere very specific. Here is the first thing you need to understand about criminal investigations that most people get backwards. The evidence at a crime scene does not just tell you what happened. It tells you what did not happen. And what did not happen in the Nancy Guthrie case eliminates almost every theory the public has been debating for 3 months. Start with the interior of Nancy's home. Immaculate, law enforcement sources confirmed it. No overturned furniture, no broken objects, no physical evidence of a prolonged struggle inside those walls, Whatever happened to Nancy happened at the threshold, at the exit point, not inside. Now look at what was taken from that home. Nothing. Someone entered that property having planned the entry in advance. Someone who was armed and gloved and equipped. Someone who moved through that environment without hesitation. And nothing of value was removed from the property. Jewelry, electronics, cash, items of value that exist in every home in a neighborhood like the Catalina foothills, all of it untouched. That single fact eliminates robbery as a motive before it can gain any traction, because robbery has one defining characteristic. You take things, nothing was taken, robbery was eliminated. What about a stranger who acted on impulse? An opportunist who spotted a vulnerability and decided to act? Look at the preparation visible in the doorbell footage. A specific backpack, specific gloves, a specific holster. Foliage used to cover the camera lens. A 41-minute operational window executed without a single sign of chaos or improvisation inside the house. This was not improvised, not even slightly. The planning visible in that footage required advanced knowledge of the property, the camera system, the routine of the person living inside it, and the specific window of vulnerability that existed between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning. A complete stranger does not possess that knowledge. An opportunist does not arrive prepared for every contingency. Random opportunity was eliminated. What about kidnapping for ransom? This is where the documented research into how ransom cases actually operate becomes critical. Genuine ransom kidnappings resolve within days, not weeks, not months, days. The reason is simple and pragmatic. Every hour a kidnapper holds a victim, they increase their own risk of being caught. The victim is precious cargo that needs to be returned quickly in exchange for payment. The entire logic of ransom kidnapping is speed. Make the demand, collect the payment, release the victim, and disappear. Genuine ransom cases always include proof of life. The kidnappers have to demonstrate the victim is alive and being cared for, because without that proof, no family pays and no negotiation begins. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over 100 days. She did not have her medication with her when she left. She has a pacemaker and a documented cardiac condition. No officially verified ransom demand exists in the public record. No confirmed proof of life has been offered. That is not how ransom kidnapping looks, not in a single documented case in the research literature. Ransom was eliminated. So what remains? When you remove robbery, when you remove opportunity, when you remove ransom, the field narrows to something that the research describes with a precision that most people find deeply uncomfortable. Because what remains is not a stranger's crime. Documented research across thousands of homicide cases in the United States establishes that the overwhelming majority of people who are killed in this country, numbers ranging from 76% up to 92% in the most comprehensive analyses of national data, knew their killer in some capacity before the crime occurred. Knew them in some capacity. Not necessarily closely, not necessarily as a friend or a family member. The connection could be a contractor who worked on the property, a service provider who made regular visits, a neighbor, a medical contact, someone Nancy recognized from a place she visited regularly. The connection could range from intimate to passing, but statistically, it existed. When you apply that documented reality to this specific case, to this specific crime, to this specific 84-year-old woman taken from a home she had lived in for 50 years in a quiet residential neighborhood where unfamiliar movement gets noticed, the conclusion the evidence points toward is not comfortable. But it is the only one the data supports. Whoever came to Nancy Guthrie's door on the night of January 31st, 2026, was not a stranger discovering an opportunity. They had been in her world. Now look at the person on that doorbell footage with fresh eyes, not as the central actor in this crime, as a piece of it. Because the composure that figure displayed at that porch camera is not the composure of someone acting alone on their own plan. The movement patterns, the specific equipment, the knowledge of the camera and how to cover it, the 41-minute execution window that left the interior of the house completely undisturbed. All of that reflects a level of operational thinking that the amateurish errors visible in the same footage completely contradict. The holster was worn incorrectly, positioned in a way that created actual physical danger for the person wearing it. The firearm did not match the holster, indicating someone who carries weapons for appearance rather than from genuine familiarity with them. Basic errors that someone with real operational training would never make. Here is the contradiction that sits at the center of this case. The person on that porch was calm enough to execute a 41-minute operation without producing chaos, and careless enough to make errors that a genuinely trained operative would never make. Composed but not competent, capable of violence but not skilled at concealing it. That contradiction has one explanation. This person was following instructions. They did not design this plan, they delivered it. Someone else did the thinking. Someone else made the decisions about timing and equipment and approach. Someone else understood the property, the routine, the vulnerabilities, and the window. The person on that porch was the delivery mechanism, not the architect. Think about what changes when you understand this crime through that lens. The person who designed this is someone Nancy would not have feared, someone who appeared kind to her, someone she may have welcomed into her home without hesitation, someone whose presence in her life had some legitimate or semi-legitimate explanation, someone who knew her routine because they had some reason to be around her, someone whose access to her world was not forced but natural, and someone who had a specific and powerful reason to want Nancy gone. Not gone temporarily, gone. Because the crime that matches this profile is not kidnapping, it is not robbery, it is what forensic researchers call elimination murder. Elimination murder is the removal of a specific person from your life through homicide because that person's continued existence stands between you and something you want. The motive is not rage, it is not passion, it is calculation. The most common motivations in documented elimination murder cases are financial. Someone whose death results in assets changing hands. Someone whose continued existence blocks access to property, inheritance, or an estate. Someone whose care has become incompatible with the life another person wants to live. And sometimes, someone who knows something that cannot be allowed to remain known. The defining characteristic that distinguishes elimination murder from other homicide types is staging. The perpetrator works deliberately to make the crime look like something it is not. They manufacture the appearance of a random intrusion by a stranger. They construct a scene designed to point investigators away from the people in the victim's personal world and toward an anonymous outside threat. But the staging always fails in the same critical way. It fails to fake the motive. A staged robbery leaves behind valuables that a real robber would have taken. A staged random assault leaves behind a scene with no clear benefit to any stranger. The surface of the scene is constructed, but the motivational structure underneath it is empty. And that empty motivational structure is what points investigators back toward the people with actual reasons. Look at Nancy's home one more time. Nothing taken, no clear benefit to any stranger. A blood trail at the exit point suggesting something went wrong during the removal, not during a struggle inside. A strategically opened back door. A camera disabled before entry. Someone built a scene designed to look like a random intrusion, and built it in a way that tells anyone looking carefully that no actual stranger had any reason to be there. Now consider what the DNA evidence can still do with all of this. Mixed biological material was recovered from Nancy's home. Genetic material from more than one individual layered together in the same sample. Neither contributor matches anyone in the national DNA database of over 19 million offender profiles. That last detail is not a dead end. It is the most important investigative data point in the entire case. No match in the criminal database means whoever left that biological material at Nancy's home has never been arrested before. No prior convictions. No documented criminal history. A person living what appears from the outside to be a completely ordinary life. Someone who attends family dinners. Someone who drives elderly women home at night. Someone who smiles warmly and seems genuinely helpful and has absolutely no visible reason for anyone to look at them with suspicion. The genetic genealogy process now underway at Quantico and at the San Francisco laboratory that helped convict the Gilgo Beach serial killer using rootless hair DNA can reach someone who has never appeared in a criminal database. It builds outward from a partial match in a commercial genealogy database. A partial match becomes a relative becomes a branch becomes a family tree, names emerge from that tree. Those names get cross-referenced against the physical profile visible in the doorbell footage, against the cell tower data, against the documented list of people who had access to Nancy's world in the months before February 1st. C.C. Moore, the genetic genealogist who helped identify the Golden State Killer and has contributed to solving over 300 cold cases, is involved in this analysis. And she said publicly that if the hair recovered from Nancy's home belongs to the person who took her, the science now at Quantico will solve this case. Not help solve it, solve it. Here is the question that the documented research forces us to ask. If two people were involved in this crime, one who designed it and one who executed it, why has nobody come forward for a reward that now exceeds $1 million? The research offers three possibilities. The first, the person who physically executed the crime is no longer alive. Eliminating the one person with direct knowledge of who gave the order is a documented pattern in crimes with this structure. The fewer living witnesses, the lower the risk. And someone who planned carefully enough to design this crime is someone capable of calculating that risk and acting on it. The second, the person who executed the crime genuinely does not know the identity of the person who designed it. Criminal operations with a sophisticated organizer sometimes involve complete separation between tiers. The person who carries out the physical work knows what to do. They do not know who ultimately gave the order or why. The third, the circle of people with knowledge is small enough and tight enough that the reward has not yet reached anyone willing to collect it. Each possibility represents a different investigative pathway, and each one narrows as the DNA analysis progresses and as investigators build out the family tree from whatever partial match the laboratory has already found. There is one more thing. The documented research is consistent on what happens once the first arrest is made in a crime with this structure, regardless of which tier that person represents. Whether they are the executor or have knowledge of the organizer. The willingness to cooperate changes dramatically the moment the alternative becomes a federal prison sentence. One arrest, and the rest of the truth tends to follow. Think about the last ordinary evening you experienced, the last night that felt completely routine, nothing unusual, no reason to be afraid, just the end of a normal day. That was January 31st for Nancy Guthrie. Dinner with family, a ride home, a garage door closing behind her, the beginning of what should have been just another night. She is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker that recorded the exact moment her ordinary evening ended. That device went silent at 2:28 in the morning of February 1st, 2026. More than 100 days later, her family is still waiting for an answer. If anything in this video triggered a memory, a name, a face, a person in Tucson who made you deeply uncomfortable in a way you never quite forgot, someone whose reaction to a small slight was wildly out of proportion, someone who held a grudge longer than made any sense, someone whose access to Nancy's world now looks different in light of everything you have just heard. Do not dismiss it. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI, completely anonymous, no name required. Over $1 million in reward, money remains unclaimed. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because when the DNA at Quantico produces a result, when the family tree points to a name, when the first arrest is made, this channel will be here to tell you exactly what it means and exactly where it leads. Drop a comment below: the elimination framework, the waiter and the architect, the 92%, the staged scene that failed to fake a motive, the DNA that ruled out every prior offender in the national database. Which single detail do you believe points this investigation most directly toward the person who designed this crime? Tell us. We read every single one. Because Nancy Guthrie's story is not finished. And the person who decided it should be is running out of the time the staging bought them.